Today we'll be reading Learning Curve by Lemonhead15. Summary. You promise you won't be mad. Do not make me lie to you, Midoriya Zuko. Right, sorry, bad start, Midoriya squeaked. Shota could almost see the kid on the other end of the line, probably vibrating with enough nervous energy to power a small city. Seriously, this whole tea thing was, everyone's okay. Physically. Everyone is fine. Well, property damage is mostly covered by insurance. Probably? Shota closed his eyes and leaned his head against the headboard with a dull, rhythmic thud. Property damage. At 1 in the morning? On your break? Just a bit. What happened? Shota drew out the words, each symbol dripping with a bone-deep exhaustion. Long pause followed, then a whisper, and then it barely carried through the speakers. I got into a fight. Where? The silence on the other end was deafening. Midoriya Izuku, Shota warned, using the kid's full name again, voice dripping into a low, dangerous territory that usually made students scramble for cover. A bar? Midoriya whispered. Or, as always, Shota receives a call from a police station at 1 a.m. Notes. I've had this in my draft since December, so I decided to polish it up and post it. I don't think I've posted it mostly Aizawa Midoriya based fic, so here it is. Trigger warnings: physical violence, pre/regret, injury, self-blame/guilt, emotional stress, exhaustion/burnout, parental/guardian absence, minor depictions of alcohol, bar setting. Happy readings. See you in the look for more notes. Chapter 1 out of 1. Midoriya Izuku was constant stream of surprises. Aizawa Shota had figured that much out since the kid launched that fastball, somehow finding a loophole to stay in the game without shattering his entire body in the process. Since then, Midoriya's growth had been nothing short of relentless, an uphill climb over the course of a single year, not even. It was impressive, sure, but it left Shota with one nagging thought. If only the kid had bothered with training that power of his earlier in life. Yes, that wasn't exactly what was eating at him now. It was the middle of a faculty merge 3-day winter break, a brief window of quiet while students were away for their 5 and Shota spent and Shota was spent. He should have been sleeping. Instead, he found himself staring at Midoriya's last analysis from the previous week. It was brilliant, methodical, and deeply frustrating. He couldn't wrap his head around how a mind analytical could consider making such a monetarily stupid decision. Shota let out a long, slow exhale that was halfway to a groan, leaning back until his desk chair creaked in protest. The report in front of him was covered in Midoriya's cramped, frantic handwriting, pages of tactical observance that were, quite frankly, genius. The kid could probably disarm any quirk in minutes, yet he still hadn't figured out that jumping off a roof to save a cat, that was a whole ordeal that, if not for Uraka, Midoriya might be a pancake on some random neighborhood pavement, or driving headfirst into an excuse without backup. A cup was a one-way ticket to Recovery Square office. It was a special kind of disaster. Midori had the strategical mind of a veteran general, with the self-preservance instincts of a moth in a candle shop. With a lovely combination of a 16-year what a lovely combination for a 16-year-old boy to have. Shota rubbed the bridge of his Shota rubbed the bridge of his nose, the yellow glow of his desk lamp making his eyes ache. He really should put the file away. It was break. He should be face down on a sleeping bag, ignoring the world until his internal clock demanded caffeine. Every time Shota's eyes skimmed over a particular reckless suggestion, he felt the familiar rhythmic throb of a vein in his temple. His eyes gave a sympathetic twitch. The kid was going to give him an aneurysm before graduation, and the worst part was that Midoriya would probably have a 3-page analysis on why the aneurysm happened. I cannot believe you're grading. A voice rang out, slicing through the heavy silence of the apartment. Shota didn't even bother to look up from the notebook. He knew the specific characters of a mix of belief and fond exasperation that carried perfectly, even when the volume wasn't set to an announcer. Hizashi, he hummed, his voice a low rasp from hours of discourse. When he felt the air shift as his husband stepped closer, bringing with him a familiar scent of expensive hair products and citrus. Hizashi leaned over the back of the chair, his chin coming to rest near Shota's shoulder as he preened at the messy diagram and frantic scribbling cluttering the desk. It's winter break show, the no work zone, the thing we discussed over coffee like 8 hours ago. Hizashi reached down and tapping a mechanical finger right on a particular jagged sketch. Is this Midoriya's? Give it a rest, man. The kid's probably at home sleeping, not overanalyzing his own overanalysis. Where's Eri? Tucked and snugged, just like you should be, Hizashi said, poking Shota's side. Shota finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and heavy with a bone-deep exasperation that no amount of caffeine could fix. Logic disregards that. If I don't finish this now, I'll just be thinking about it while I'm trying to sleep. This is more, efficient. Efficiency is a lie you tell yourself to justify being a workaholic, Sashi countered, moving from behind the chair to lean against the edge of the desk. He crossed his arms, officially blocking Shota's view of the 1A files. Seriously, Sho, you were looking a little haggard, even for you. Fuck you too. Zashi rolled his eye. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. You know what I mean. Shota let out a dry, rattled breath, the tension in his shoulders refusing to break. He glanced back at the notebook, specifically a mangled note where Midori had detailed 3 different ways to break his own bones to escape a hypothetically armed bar. It was written with the parchment of writing a grocery list, which was perhaps the most disturbing part. The kid has no off switch. The kid has no off switch. Zashi. The kid has no off switch. Zashi. Shota muttered, rubbing his face with both hands. He spent the last year catching up to a decade of missed progress, which Doesn't even get me started on the whole issue. He's been doing it by spitefully turning his legs snap. If I don't figure out how to stop him from just this go, go, go mindset, he's going to burn out before he hits his second year. Sasashi's expression softened. The tension edged in his poster fading into something more grounded. He reached out, gently prying Shota's hand away from his face. He's got a good teacher, one who knows a thing or two about pushing too hard, but this teacher is currently settling a terrible example. Hisashi nodded towards the hallway. Bed now, or I'm calling Namuri, and I'll have her use her quirk on you. Ha! I'd like to see her try. That's a bold claim from a man who hasn't blinked in 45 minutes, Hisashi snorted, reaching down to finally click the desk lamp off. The sudden darkness left green and white spots dancing in Shota's vision. The remnant of Midoriya's frantic scribbles burned into his retinas. I have eye drops, Shota countered dryly, though he didn't move to turn the light back on. You have a problem, Hisashi corrected, his tone shifting from playful to a low warmth he reserved only for the full four walls of their home. He rested a hand on the back of Shota's neck, thumb tracing the tension gradually through. Mary wouldn't even need her quirk. One heavy blanket and a dark room and you're out like a light. Don't make me get the weighted one. Shota let his head hang. The weight of the long semester finally settling into his bones. Now that was an artificial glow in the artificial glow of the lamp was gone. He looked at the silhouette of Midoriya's assignment on top of the dim moonlighting. He was a puzzle, a brilliant, self-sacrificing, dangerous puzzle, but he was a puzzle for next week. Fine, Shota muttered, pushing back from the desk with a heavy sigh. If I wake up at 4 a.m., I'm getting back up and finishing the grading. If you wake up at 4 a.m., you're staying in bed, listening to me snore until sun comes up. Hisashi joked, gently guiding him towards the door. It's the law of winter break logic, remember? Shota didn't even make it to 4 a.m. In fact, the clock had barely ticked past 1 a.m. when the sharp, intensive buzz of his phone sliced through the dark. He glanced at the lump of blankets beside him. Luckily, Hisashi a snore that could drown out a jet engine. He didn't so much as twitch. The huff of annoyance and a heavy-lidded squint. Shota reached the bedside table. A harsh glare of the harsh glare of the screen stung his eyes, forcing a sharp wince as he tried to decode the digital glow. He expected a frantic memory, a work emergency, or perhaps a wrong number. When he found was a cold spike of adrenaline. A police station calling him at 1 a.m. It wasn't Murray's usual pedantic either. It wasn't Murray's usual preaching which spiked a needle of traction through his sleep-deprived brain. He took a breath, trying to steady the irritation before he turned into a full-blown dread. Please, Shota thought, sliding the thumb across the glass. Please let it be another thing. Anything other than what I think it is. I thought it was Shota, he answered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that sounded more like a smart than greeting. Hey, Aizawa Shota. No, it says, hey, Aizawa Sensei. It was Midoriya. Because of course it was. At 1 a.m., during the only 3 days of peace Shota was allotted by the universe. The universe had decided to check in and demand a refund. Midoriya. Shota sighed the name, sounding more like a weary exhaustion than a noun. I should just, preference that. I'm okay. Really? I'm okay. Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? Shota shot up in bed, heart rate spiking, thinking in direct contradiction to his deadpan tone. Beside him, Hisashi shifted, let out a particularly loud snore, and settled back into the pillows, blissfully unaware of the intimidating migraine eating on the other end of the line. Don't panic, Midoriya's voice came through the receiver, sounding small and suspiciously echoed, like he was in a tiled room, a holding cell, perhaps, or a very cold hallway. I'm perfectly calm, Shota replied, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the phone. Now tell me why you are calling me from a police precinct that isn't even in the same district as your house. Promise you won't be mad. The silence followed was heavy with a weight of a dozen broken bones and a semester worth of gray hairs. Shota felt that familiar vein in his temple starting to thump in with his heartbeat. Don't make me lie to you, Midoriya Zuko. Right, sorry, that start. Midoriya squeaked. Shota could almost see the kid on the other end of the line, probably vibrating with enough nervous energy to power a small city. Seriously, this whole thing was, everyone's okay. Physically, everyone is fine. Well, the property damage is mostly covered by insurance, probably. Shota closed his eyes and leaned his head against the headboard with a dull rhythmic thud. Property damage at 1 in the morning on your break. Just a bit. What happened? Then Shota drew out the word, each syllable dripping with a bone-deep exhaustion. A long pause followed, then a whisper so thin it barely covered through the speaker. I got into a fight. Where? The silence at the other end was deafening. Midoriya Izuku, Shota warned, using the kid's full name again, his voice drifting into that low, dangerous territory that usually made Zuko scramble for cover. A bar, Midoriya finally whispered. Shota sat, frozen for a beat, his brain trying to recoil the image of the most studious, heroic, hero-obsessed student with a midnight brawl in a dive bar. The trance destruction he had oozing over just hours ago had officially reached its peak. You're 16. Shota said flatly, you shouldn't even be allowed to get through the doors, let alone find someone to fight inside. It's not what it sounds like, Midoriya's voice was red to crush grumble. I didn't go there to drink, obviously. I was just walking past and I heard a crash and someone screaming and my legs just they moved sensei. I thought it was a villain attack, but it was just a very intense disagreement over a card game that turned into, it turned into a lot of things. And then the table broke, and then the wall broke, and then, yeah. Sorry guys, that ramble was a lot for my lungs. Shota let out a long, pained breath, his hands sliding down his face, and then the police arrived, Midoriya confirmed, his voice suddenly small and defeated, and they wouldn't even let me go until a legal guardian or teacher could pick me up because of yeah. Why were you even out? I was at a convenience store, Midoriya's voice took on a frantic, defensive edge, which he only got when he was technically telling the truth, but knowing it sounded suspicious. And they had a sale on these limited edition hero notebooks. The one with the gold foil, and they only restocked at midnight, and they're almost always sell out by morning. Shota groaned, his head dropping back at the headboard with a hollow thump. Of course, it wasn't a villain ambush or secret training exercise. It was just a hero nerd emergency. A stationary cell. Showed a deadpan staring at the dark ceiling. You're currently in police's custody because of a bunch of paper. It's high quality cardstock, Sensei. There's like 1,000 of them in circulation worldwide. It doesn't bleed through when I use markers. Midoriya hissed. He quickly lowered his voice. I didn't use my quirk. Not even a little bit. I just utilized the environment to stop the fighting, which apparently involves more property damage than I thought. Shota rubbed his eyes until he saw sparks. No quirks. If Midoriya had used his quirk, this would be a licensing nightmare. Since he hadn't, it was a regular garden. Very disrupt. Thank you, universe. Midoriya, Shota said, his voice dangerously level. Explain to me, using the most consistent logic possible, how a card game this through resulted in you breaking a wall without using your quirk. Well, Midoriya's voice took that analytical mumble. The guy with the chair had a very wide swinging radius, and I realized if I didn't redirect his momentum into the load-bearing pillar, which turned out to be less load-bearing and more drywall, then that place really needed improvement. He would have seriously hurt someone. And then the other guy tried to tackle me, and I just stepped aside, and he was moving very fast since I saw he kind of went flying. Then this other guy sort of punched me. There in the room seemed to chill. Shota's protective instincts usually buried under a layer of criticism and exhaustion flared to life. He was already halfway out of the blankets, his feet hitting the cold floor, this time landing firmly. His mind cataloged the potential injuries. Where did he hit you? Shota asked. Midoriya paused and stuttered. It's not that bad, Midoriya. The face. Oh, hell no. But it's okay. I mean, it was just a standard right hook. No enhanced strength or anything. I just didn't want to hit back because, well, I'm a student and that would be an escalation of force. So I just let my face take the impact to de-escalate. Should just squeezed the bridge of his nose so hard he saw stars. Midoriya, letting someone punch you in the face is not de-escalation. He stood up from the bed. He didn't even bother with the lights. Hell, he didn't even bother putting on power shoes. His slippers would have to do. Here he was chatting with it instead of going to get the kid. He didn't use a quirk either. Should ask. Already pulling on some random pair of pants, he pulled off the chair with one hand while balancing the phone against his shoulder. No one did. It was completely quirkless barbed wall. Well, Midoriya said, sounding oddly proud of the specific detail, which is why the police are so confused. They kept asking me why I didn't just use my quirk to scare them off, and I told them that would be a gross violation of the workers' treatment law. Then they asked why teenager was in the bar at 1 a.m, and I showed them my gold-foiled notebooks, and now they laughed at me for a bit. Does your mother know about this? No, she's staying at a friend's house. Shota paused, with one beat halfway out. His eyes narrowed in the dark. That changed a little more than just a bit. So you're telling me, Shota said, voice dripping into every sign that was more tired parent than tired teacher. You were home alone, deciding to go on a midnight stationary run, end up in a worthless bar fight. And instead of calling the woman who is actually has legal custody of you, you called your teacher, who's currently on his one break of the year. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds silly, Zuko mumbled. Shota could hear the distant and muffled laughter of, of from a police officer in the background. My mom gets worried, Sensei, and if she saw me at the police station with a bruised cheek, she'd cry for like 3 days straight. You don't cry, you just get scary. You'll be glad my impending wrath is a comfort to you, Midoriya. Shota deadpanned. Where are you? East Musatafu Police, East Precinct. Shota held a groan, snagging his key off the dresser. Caught the reflection in the mirror, hair a tousled mess, eyes bloodshot, and in his haste he had apparently donned a pair of Slashy's neon pink sweatpants. Lovely, truly the terrifying image of a pro hero. If any of the officers recognized him, he'd never get them with it. Don't move, don't talk, and for the love of everything, do not try to de-escalate any more drunks with your face until I get there. I won't, Sensei, I'm just sitting here. Wait, what? Is his voice muffled as he turned to speak to someone else? Oh yeah, sorry. Sure, I'm sorry. As all Sensei, I have to go. Tenki, Tenkadi San needs to use the phone. Who? I don't know how to say that name. Sorry for butchering it. Who? I don't know. I just met him. He says he's only gets one call and he forgot his lawyer's number. He said because he's a repeated offender. He said, so I'm going to see if I can help him look it up in the... Midoriya, hang up the phone, Shota ordered, but the line had already gone dead. Shota stared at the phone for a long, silent second. Student, the boy who possessed a quirk capable of leveling buildings, was currently playing legal assistant to a repeated offender in a holding cell because he was too polite to say no. Logic was simple. Faster as Shota got to the station, the fewer criminals Midoriya could accidentally befriend. Shota pushed the heavy glass door of the station. The chilly night air followed him into the stereo bustle sent lit lobby. He didn't even give the officer at the front desk a chance to finish his second yawn. Hello, can I? There's a kid here, Shota interrupted, his voice like grinding gravel. He stood there, a terrified version of a sleep-deprived fury, standing tall in his Ashi's neon-pink sweatpants. Where is he? The officer blinked, his gaze dropping to the bright pink fleece before traveling back to the red-rimmed eyes. The man in across the counter opened his mouth like to ask for deep ID or perhaps to comment on the questionable fashion choice. The look in Shota's face effectively killed any attempt at small talk. Oh, Midoriya? The officer asked, pointing a thumb towards the back. He's in the processing area, sir. He was helping us with some filing while he waited. Shota's eyes gave a violent, rhythmic twitch. Of course, he didn't wait for an escort. He pushed past the gate and into the back room with a fresh headache blooming behind his eyes. There was Midoriya Zuko, a massive dark breeze already blooming on his cheekbone and stretching up towards the corner of his right eye. True form. He wasn't alone. He was leaning over a disheveled-looking officer's shoulder. So that's why you should organize the file by alphabetical order first, then subcategorize by quirk classification, Midoriya was saying, his voice bright and earnest despite the melted purple and blue swirling on his face. It would cut down the retrieval time by at least 50%. And of the in investigation terms, the officer was hovering was nodding slowly, looking less like a lawman and more like a student who has actually sat through 3 hours lecture on Bertram Beatrix. I don't know how to say that word, guys. Midoriya. The boy jumped, spinning around. He was wearing a dark blue sweater. There, some black shorts in the middle of winter. Hi, Aizawa Sensei. What are you wearing? I'm wearing these because it's 1 in the morning and I was under the impression there is an emergency, Shota said, his voice dropping an octave as he said something like grabbing Midoriya's chin, tilting his head back to inspect the damage. It was a nasty hit. The skin was already tightening and turning a deep, angry plum color, and yet I find you acting like a volunteer consultant for the Musutaku Police Department. I felt bad, Midoriya defended, though he winced as his thumb bristled the edge of the swelling. Officer Sato, though, was having a really hard time I'm finding incident reports from last Tuesday, and I was just sitting here being a problem, so I thought I'd help. It's the logical thing to do, right? Shota stared at him, his expression flat, using the man's own catchphrase against him while sporting a black eye was a low blow, even for a teenager who had been just punched in a bar. The logical thing to do would be stay home and sleep, Midoriya, not engage in a bar brawl over a card game, and then reorganize a precinct's archives. He turned his gaze to the officer who was currently trying to hide his work behind a coffee mug. Is he clear? I have a very limited amount of patience left before I let him stay here and finish the file. He is clear. Erase your head. The officer chuckled. Shoto's vaguely recognized him now as a regular on Sukuachi's premature terms. Saito, yeah, it's Saito, so I'm just gonna say Sato, but I don't know how to pronounce that. Guys, sorry, I'm bad at Japanese names. Roast me for it in the comments, guys. Sato waved a hand dismissively. The bar owner isn't pressing charges since the kid is technically stopped those guys from trashing the place, or mostly, and he didn't use a quirk. We just needed Guardian to sign him out. Honestly, he's been more help in 30 minutes than our last intern was in a month. Don't encourage him, Shoto grunted, signing the release form with a jagged, aggressive scowl that nearly ripped through the paper. He grabbed the back of Midoriya's hoodie, steering him towards the door like a stray kitten. Let's go now. As they walked towards the exit and the cold air hit them, Midoriya trotted to keep up with Shota's long and agile strides. The boy kept glancing down at the neon peak fleece, his shoulders shaking with the suppressed effort of holding back a laugh. Sensei, don't say a word about the pants, Midoriya. Not one syllable. I wasn't. It's just they're funny. I should have stopped at the side of his car and leveled a finger at the boy, his expression lethal. Get in the car before he decides that the precinct actually does need a permanent filing clerk. Woodard scrambled into the passenger seat, clutching a plastic bag that was probably had the infamous gold-foiled notebooks Shota climbed into the driver's seat. The neon pink fabric of his stolen sweatpants glowing mockingly in the lights of the dashboard. He sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, forward resting against the back of his knuckles. When he finally settled in, he slammed the door, and for a long moment the only sound was the clicking of a waking engine. Sensei, Midori asked softly, his voice losing the frantic edge and turning genuinely apologetic. Not a word, Shota hissed. The car was silent for about 20 seconds. Sensei, Midoriya's voice was small as an ant. No talking, but hush. Shota stared straight through the windshield, watching the disorientated kid reflect of the station's neon signs in the glass. He was acutely aware of the boy beside him, the bruising face, the bag of notebooks clutched like lifeline, and the sheer exhaustion, earnest, earnestness radiating off of him. I'm really sorry about the break, Midori whispered finally, ignoring the command from silence. I know you don't get much time off. Shoto leaned his head against the headrest, closing his eyes. If you were actually sorry, you would have stayed in your house. Midori winced at that. Sorry. Shota gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white against the black leather. He didn't turn the key, he just sat there in the dark, the neon pink of his borrowed sweatpants glowing mockingly in the peripheral of his vision. He let out a long, weary sigh as he finally pulled the car away from the curb. The city lights flickered across the dashboard, headlights highlighting the sharp contrast between his black shirt and the neon pink fleece bunched at his waist. I don't need an apology, kid, Shota said, his voice dripping into a low, gravelly signal that usually signaled a lecture was coming. I don't want to have to pick up another one of my students at 1 a.m. at a police station. I know, Midori whispered, looking down on his knees. He looked small in the passenger seat. The heat of the December night found me cooling into the realization that he had officially dragged his teacher out of bed. It's just when I saw those guys starting trouble, I didn't think about the time or place. I just thought about what would happen if I didn't do anything. Do you? No. I mean, Shota countered. Do you? Okay, I'm confused. This sentence is making my brain hurt. Whatever. Go back to reading, guys. Do you? No. I mean, Shota countered. Turned, finally turned to look at the boy, his red-rimmed eyes narrowing. The logic of going out at midnight for a notebook and ending up in a brawl is a bit beyond to me. You're lucky that the precinct staff is staffed by people who are too tired to file paperwork for a minor involved in a bar fight. They were really nice about the filing tips. I wanted to help, but I offered weakly. That's your problem, Midoriya. You think about everyone except for yourself. Shota countered. He kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel relaxed slightly. There were officers on patrol. There were staff members. You aren't a pro yet, and you aren't on duty. You're a kid on winter break. I know, Midoriya whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. No, Midoriya, I don't think you do. Shota pressed his tone devoid of its usual sharp edge, replaced instead by something much quieter, because knowing something intelligent and acting interesting are two different things. You're currently carrying a bag with a convenience store notebook that cost you a bruised skull, and a trip to the precinct. If there had been a villain with a high-level quirk instead of a drunk with a bad attitude, I wouldn't be driving you to school. I'd be meeting your mother in the hospital, or worse. I know, I really do, Rodeo said once and more. His voice dropped so low it was almost lost. He looked down at the plastic bag in his lap, the gold foil little notebook shimmering markedly under the streetlights. I didn't think. Exactly, Shota said. You don't think. You reacted. In the field that reflects saves lives. In a bar in East Mississippi during winter break, it just gets you a police record and a concussion. He turned off the ignition. He couldn't lecture him like this, and pulled off the street to turn to Midoriya. Shota looked at the kid. Really looked at him. Midoriya looked exhausted, his hair even more chaotic than usual, with a bruise that was starting to turn a sickly shade of yellow-green at the edge. Your actions have consequences, Midoriya. Tonight the consequence is that I'm awake. You're injured, and your mom is going to be worried when she eventually finds out. Next time the consequence could be your career, or your life. Shota's voice was cold, the words cutting through the cramped silence of the car, then fueled by a cocktail of raw exhaustion and the lingering spike of adrenaline. He added words he knew, even as they left his mouth. He shouldn't say. You just don't think. If you used your head half as much as you used your heart, you wouldn't be constantly finding new ways to be so reckless with your own safety. He had meant to say reckless, reckless, or perhaps illogical, but sleep-deprived mind, the edge of frustration snapped into something meaner. If you actually stopped to think, maybe you'd stop being so useless to yourself in these situations. Just want to remind you all that I don't read these fics ahead of time, so recording these is my first reading. The car went dead silent. Midoriya flinched as if Shota had actually swung at him. The boy's grip on the gold-foiled notebooks tightened until the bag had crinkled loudly in the quiet. He didn't even look up. He just shrank into an oversized passenger seat, his shoulders pulling inwardly. Shota felt a pang of immediate regret. He crossed the line from stern teacher to cruel, and the sight of the kid, bruised, tired, and now verbally stung by the one person he called when he got arrested, made Shota's stomach turn. Midoriya, Shota began softly, the words feeling heavy and wrong in the air. Nope, you're right, Midoriya cut him off quickly. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was hollow, colored by a quiet, diminishing acceptance of that made Shota's chest tighten. I know. I'm in a lot of trouble. I shouldn't have called. It was selfish to wake up because I couldn't handle this simple situation without making a mess. He finally looked up at the sight. It was a punch to the gut. Midoriya was crying. His eyes were shiny, reflecting the passing streetlights. The dark bruise on his cheek seemed even more prominent now that the light had gone on out of his expression. I'll be better, the boy whispered, turning his gaze back to the plastic bag in his lap. His knuckles white as he gripped the gold foil notebook. I'm sorry for being useless. Shoto gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. The word hung between them like a physical barrier. He spent months trying to build this kid up, trying to teach him that his worth wasn't tied to how much of his own body he could break. In one moment of sleep-deprived irritability, he used the one word he would know the most. Midoriya, look at me, Shota said, his voice no longer a rasp of exhaustion. It was a firm, grounded, and stripped of its previous Yes, bite. Midoriya didn't move. Didn't seem intent on. He seemed intent on counting the threads of the plastic bag. Izuku, look at me. The use of his given name did what the command couldn't. Midoriya flinched, his head turning slowly, his eyes wide and shimmering with a hurt that made Shota's want to drive the car into a literal wall. I was at a line, Shota said. His grip on the wheel finally loosening. That word, it doesn't apply to you. Not the bar, not my classroom, and certainly not today. You're many things. Reckless, frustratingly self-sacrificial, and an absolute headache to my blood pressure. But you are not that. You've always been so smart. You just need to slow down and realize that your safety matters too. Do you understand me? Midoriya blinks, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down to his unbruised cheek. He finally looked. He wanted to believe it, but the doubt was still there, flinching in the shadow of his eyes. I'm frustrated, Shota continued, his voice softening. I'm frustrated because I see you throwing yourself into stupid situations for a piece of paper, and I'm terrified that one day I won't be able to get there in time to pick you up. I don't mean what I said. I didn't mean what I said. I was speaking out of exhaustion, not the truth. But you're right, Midoriya whispered. I should be better by now. I should be able to handle these things without making people come to save me. You're 16, Shota reminded. And even though I don't know why you didn't turn your quirk before this year. I'm a late bloomer, Midoriya cut in, his voice trembling. I didn't get my quirk until later, really late. Shota went still, the key already half turned in the ignition, but he let his hand drop. He processed the word, his logical brain immediately cross-referencing Midoriya's files. It was the one that listed his quirk as a simple power manifestation, the one that had always seemed to so ill fit the boy. His total lack of physical muscle memory. Late bloomer, Shota repeated, his voice low. Midoriya. Most children develop their ability by the age of 4. Even the latest of bloomers usually see a spark by elementary school. I was a false negative, Midoriya mumbled, his thumb tracing the edge of the gold foiled notebook. He wouldn't look up. He seemed persisted by the dashboard. A very false negative. I spent most of my life thinking I was quirkless, so yeah, I don't want to be useless. Not again. The silence of the car became suffocating. Shota felt a heavy, cold stone settle in his stomach. He thought back to the entrance exam, to the way Midori had shattered his limbs to save a girl he didn't even know, the way he looked at Shota on the first day of school. He was terrified, desperate, fundamentally raw. Well, he hadn't been training for years like Bakugo, Todoroki. He hadn't grown up with the safety net of power. He had been standing in the lines at the starting line while everyone else was already barreling towards the finish. He had been trying to sprint the entire distance in a single year. Midoriya, Shota said, and this time he reached over, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. The fabric of the hoodie felt thin under his palm as he realized the kid was shivering. I didn't know that, Shota admitted. His voice was stern but steady. But that doesn't change that what I said. If anything, it makes it more important. You aren't useless. You're playing catch up with the rest of the world, and you're doing it in the pace that is frankly terrifying. But you have to stop treating your own life like it's expendable just because you're not used to having a quirk to protect it. I'm really really am. I really am sorry. Midoriya sniffled, the sound thick and heavy with an exhaustion that went far deeper than the after midnight hours. It's an explanation for why you're so hard on yourself, Midori countered firmly. He reached out, hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently taking Midoriya's chin with 2 fingers, forcing the boy to maintain eye contact. It's okay, kid. That seemed to be the breaking point. The combined weight, the adrenaline crash, the physical pain, the useless comment, and the unexpected warmth of Shunta's forgivingness felt shattering to Midori's composure. His breath hitched, a small broken sound escaping his throat, and then he started to cry. It wasn't that loud, dramatic wailing Shota remembered seeing at the sports festival. Quite heavy sobs made his entire frame tremble. Shota Shota sat there in the silence of the car, the neon pink of his sweatpants sharp against the shadow, feeling tired out of his depth. He wasn't the hug and comfort teacher. That was his nauseous department, but he couldn't let the boy shake with grief in his passenger seat. He was a man of action, but right now the only logical action would be a presence. Shota didn't pull his hand away immediately. Instead, it slid onto Midoriya's shoulder. A rare, guiding gesture. He waited in silence, watching the boy's shoulders rise and fall as the heavy sobs eventually subsided into jagged, exhausted hiccups. Midoriya wiped his eyes with he had under the persistent harsh fluorescent lights, small, battered, and far too young. Better? Shootaman muttered, his voice gentle. Yeah, Midoriya's voice cracked. His voice felt sorry for that, too. If you apologize one more time tonight, I am making you walk, Shota threatened. His tone was devoid of actual light. He restarted the engine. The car hummed back to life. Come on. We're going back to my place. Your place? Midoriya blinked until his brain clearly struggled to keep up with the shift in logistics. You're seriously thinking I'm leaving you by yourself? Shota asked, his voice flat. Your mother is away, your house is empty, and you've already proven that within a few hours at unsupervised freedom, you'll find a way to dismantle a wall with your face. You're staying in the guest room. Midoriya looked like he wanted to argue, to claim he was fine, or that he didn't want to be a bother. But one look in Shota's unwavering expression and the undeniable glow of those pink sweatpants silenced him. We're going inside. We're fixing your face. Shota continued, pulling the car into gear. And then you're going to sleep until morning because I am not driving back across town in these pants twice in one night. Midoriya seemed surprised by the interior of Shota's apartment. He lingered awkwardly at the threshold, his gaze darting between the minimalist decor and the lived-in comfort in the space. Sorry, guys, I have to close the door. And my computer is across the room from the door. Midoriya seemed surprised by the interior of Shota's apartment. He lingered awkwardly at the threshold, his gaze darting between the minimalist decor and the lived-in comfort of the space. He looked at the thought as though he expected to trigger a trap if he stepped too far. Shota let out a low, tired groan, moved behind the boy and gently but firmly took him by both arms and ushered him inside. "Keep moving," Shota muttered, closing the door behind them and engaging the lock with a defensive click. The apartment was quiet. Save for the low hum of the refrigeration, this distant ticking of a clock. The air smelled faintly of high-grade coffee and the unscented laundry detergent Shota preferred. Midoriya stood in the center of the entryway, clutching his plastic black bag with his notebook to his chest, looking small and infinitely out of place in the dim light. "Then go to the kitchen and sit out at the island," Shota commanded. "And I'm going to get the first aid kit." Midoriya gave him a weak, shaky nod and stifled towards the kitchen, sneakers squeaking softly on the hardwood. I should have fumbled with the latch for the medicine cabinet. A low mutter with a heavy yawn drifted through the bedroom. "Sure, what are you doing up?" It was Hisashi, his speech thick and slurred. "It's nothing. Go back to bed," Shota called back. His voice is a frantic whisper as he gripped the first aid kit. He turned around just as the blonde stumbled into the hallway, his blurry eyes and clad only in a pair of low-strung sweatpants. Hisashi hummed, leaning against the door frame. I'm just gonna get a glass of water." Shota's eyes widened as he realized the trajectory Hisashi was on, straight towards the kitchen, where the student was currently sitting. "Wait, Hisashi, put on the shirt!" But it was too late. Hisashi rounded the corner into the kitchen. Blinking against the sudden light, he stopped dead. Midoriya, who had been staring mostly at his gold-flaked notebooks, looked up. His eyes went from Hisashi's mess, see loose hair down to his bare shoulders, then up to the hero's confused face. "Mike Sensei," Midoriya squeaked, his face turning a shade of red that rivaled the bruise on his cheek. The kid slapped his hand over his eyes so hard that Shota winced at the smack of the palm. "Listener," Hisashi's voice jumped an octave, his brain finally rebooting. Ding. Ding. He looked. Fuck, I lost my place. He looked at Midoriya, then at Shota, who was standing there in neon pink sweatpants, holding a roll of gauze he had snatched up in his panic, and then back at Midoriya's bruised face. "Shota, why is there a student in our kitchen? And are those my pants?" Shota let out a breath that was halfway to a scream. "It's a long story." Sashi winced at the sight of Midoriya's face. He stepped forward. His shoes were loud, energy softened by the genuine concern. "You okay, kiddo? That's a nasty bruise." Midoriya looked away hurriedly, his face growing a deep red that was then deeper red than the injury. "I'm all good, really. Please don't worry about it, Mike Sensei." "You're really not," Shota deadpanned, his expression finally manifesting a flat, rhythmic pulse behind his ears. "Hisashi, hoodie, now," Shota commanded, physically stepping between his half-dressed husband and his mortified student who blocked the view. Right, going. Put on clothes. I'll be back in a flash." Hisashi stumbled backwards, his hand in a gesture for peace, nearly tripping over the door frame as he retreated towards the bedroom. The kitchen fell into a sudden heavy silence, broken only by the distant sounds of Hisashi rummaging through a dresser. Shota sighed and turned back to Midoriya, who was hunched up, and his feet refusing to touch the ground. "Get comfortable," Shota said, his voice softened now that the chaos had momentarily cleared. He's going to come back with tea and a million questions. I'm surprised you recognize him out of costume. I saw him that one time we were doing that special class. Midori muttered through his, though his eyes were darting nervously towards the hallway. He had shifted in his seat, his voice dropping to a tiny, hopeful whisper. Is Ari here? Asleep, Shota replied. And if we're lucky, she'll stay that way. The last thing she needs is to see her favorite student looking like he lost a fight to a brick wall. He finally cracked open the first aid kit and pulled out a small tube of specialized ointment. He leaned in, his expression turned clinical as he dabbed a bit of the cream onto a sterile swab. And hold still. This is going to feel cold. The medicine touched the bruise. Midori felt a sharp breath, but stayed remarkably still. The silence of the apartment was stark contrast to the thump of the harsh lighting in the phone call earlier. Sensei? Midori asked, his voice muffled. If it's an apology, don't. It's not. I was just thinking, if my sensei said you were wearing his does that mean you guys share pajamas? Shota's head froze entirely. He stayed on Midoriya, the ointment covered swab hovering inches from the boy's cheek. He searched the kid's face for a glimmer of a joke, a smirk, a twinkle of mischief, but there was only that wide-eyed, earnest curiosity that made Midoriya so simultaneously endearing and exhausting. He genuinely didn't know. Maybe. So just has started to say but he cut himself off. His rage was searching at the sheer blinding innocence of the question. Why? Midoriya pressed, leaning in slightly his brows for in general interest. I didn't know teachers had to pick roommates, even off campus. Is it like a budget thing or for a hero thing? It makes sense, I guess, since you're both pro heroes. Midoriya, Shota interrupted, his voice reaching a level of flatness that was almost oppressive. Hisashi is not my roommate. Midori blinked. Oh, then, he's my husband. The silence that followed was so profound, it felt like the air had been struck out of the room. Midoriya's eyes widened. His eyes went wide, impossibly wide, and as he felt his mouth open. But he looked from Shota's pink sweatpants to the wedding band Shota usually kept tucked away on a chain. But the man had pulled it from its place under his shirt, and then back to the hallway where the voice hero had just retreated. Husband, Midoriya squeaked, his voice coming out in a low, strangled whisper, like married, as in like a legal, committed, like lifelong partnership. That's usually what the word implies. Yes, Shota said, finally resuming the application of the ointment. He dabbed it on the bruise with a bit more force than strictly necessary. Though tonight I'm reconsidering the lifelong part based off his choice of loungewear. I just thought you were really close colleagues, Midori stammered, his voice reaching a temperature that threatened to melt the saliva. I don't know that word. SALVE. Sorry, chat. Like I said, I actually didn't say this, but I'm not going to edit this because it's going to be like 2 hours long by the time I'm finished, and I'm not dealing with that. The ointment. That threatened to melt the ointment right off his skin. I mean, I see you guys at lunch in the fantasy room, and oh my god, I'm in your house at 2 a.m, and you're wearing a pants. I'm so sorry. I'll leave. Sit down, Shota commanded placing a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. He couldn't quite hide the tiny, tired smirk that played at the corner of his mouth at the sheer audacity of the moment. Ari is sleeping, remember? No more shouting. At that moment, Hisashi reappeared in the doorway. He had swapped his lack of shirt for a very large, oversized, and very pink push your hands up radio hoodie. Huh. So that's what made up the matching set. He offered a bright smile and began pouring water into a kettle. The domestic rhythm of his movement clashing wildly with the fact that he was an international celebrity. He caught a glimpse of Midori's shocked expression and paused. Whoa, did the medicine sting that bad, listener? Sashi asked, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. He still hadn't quite pieced together why Midori was here at 2 a.m., but his hospitable nature was already on autopilot. He just figured out the roommate situation. Shoda muttered, finally securing a piece of medical tape over the gauze. Sashi grinned, turned mischievous, his eyes lighting up behind his glasses. Oh, did you tell him about the wedding photos in the hallway, or should I go get the album? I've got one dedicated to the entire area of the cake disaster. He chuckled, turning back to the stove. So charming of us all, right? Midoriya looked like the whole night, the bar fight, the police precinct, the pink sweatpants, and now the revolution. The two loudest and quietest teachers at UA were legally wed finally seemed to kick in. In the car, Shoda was sure the kid didn't even process everything. It was too much. Where is your bathroom? Izuku squeaked, his voice cracked. He looked very desperate. Like he desperately needed 5 minutes and a cold splash of water to stop his head from spinning. Down the hall, second door to the left, Shoto said, pointed to the room. As soon as Midori scrambled out of the room, Hisashi leaned over the counter, his playful expression softening to something more serious. He just stirred with the kettle towards the hallway, his voice dropping to a low, concerned mumble. Okay, sure. Really shocked, Hisashi whispered. Why is Midori here? Is it? He paused, brows furrowing as he thought of the dark bruise he'd seen on the boy's face. Is it a domestic dispute? Did something happen at home? Shoto leaned against the counter, rubbing his edge of his nose with a fresh tension headache was beginning to throb. No, nothing like that. His mother is with a friend, but the kid decided to go on a solo mission for a notebook and ended up in a bar fight. Hisashi eyes widened. Our bar fight? A bar fight? Our Midoriya? Huh. My money was on Bakio. He was trying to break up a fight, apparently. Should have sighed, glancing towards the hallway to make sure the bathroom door was still shut. He took a hit to the face, but he did not use his quirk. He called me from the precinct because he did not have anyone else to pick him up. I couldn't exactly leave him there to sleep on a wooden bench. Hisashi's expression shifted from shock to a pained sort of sympathy. He looked at the mug he was preparing, then added an extra spoonful of honey to one of them. Poor kid, he must have been terrified. He was, Shoda admitted, his voice barely but audible. And Hisashi, he told me tonight that his quirk didn't come until the UA entrance exam. He spent the whole life thinking he was quirkless. The kettle whistled softly, but Hisashi didn't move to grab it immediately. He stood for it. The gravity of the situation sinking in. Hisashi understood better than most how silence and social isolation can do to a kid's self-worth, especially a kid who as heart on his sleeve as Ezekiel. Hisashi was the same way. It was the same. in his own way. Not many people liked hanging out with the guy who could burst their eardrums. That explains a lot. Hisashi breathed, his heart breaking just a little bit more. Exactly. So keep the roomy jokes to a minimum for tonight. Shota warned, through his eyes lacked their, though his eyes lacked their usual light. He's had enough for one evening. Copy that, Hisashi whispered back. His expressions softened. Charismatic, charismatic warm. I'll go grab some clothes. You'll sit up on the couch? Shota nodded, watching his husband disappear back towards the bedroom to raid his drawers for something soft and oversized. Shota turned his attention to the lined linen closet, pulling out a heavy quilt and a plush blanket. Hisashi knocked on the bathroom door for a moment. Carrying a bundle of folded fabrics, a pair of worn-in sweatpants, thankfully a muted gray this time, a thick hoodie with a faded radio logo. He handed them to Midoriya. Here you go, listener. They might be a little big, but they're soft, Hisashi said, his voice quieter and comforting. Thank you, Midoriya. Midoriya whispered, giving his teacher a small smile. The three chatted for a few minutes. The low hum of the kettle and the light clinking of spoons finally beginning to settle the room's frantic energy. Hisashi, busy adjusting the mugs, asked Midoriya a casual question without looking up. When no reply came, the silence that followed was heavy and immediate. Hisashi looked up from the tea he was stirring, a playful comment about honey to water ratios dying on his tongue. Midoriya, hun? Midoriya hadn't moved. He was still sitting on the stool, but his head had dropped forward, his chin resting heavily against his chest. His hands were still loosely curled around the warm mug, but through his grip had gone slack, his fingers barely hovering against the ceramic. And he's out, Hisashi whispered, drawling out the and, his voice barely a breath. He reached over with infinite care, gently prying the mug from Midoriya's fingers before it could tip and spill. Shota let out a soft huff of breath that might have been laugh if he wasn't so exhausted. He moved behind the boy, placing a steady hand on his back so he didn't slide right off the stool. He's spent, Shota muttered. Between the fight and the breakdown in the car, I'm surprised he made it through the front door. Or Hisashi sighed, his heart clearly aching for the kid. He sat the mug hug on the counter and moved to Midoriya's other side. Shota's brows furrowed. His gaze lingered on the dark bruise on Midoriya's cheek. Tonight was with a precision, wordless caution that came after years of being partners. They methodically moved the sleeping teen. They maneuvered this. Guys, I'm dyslexic. Please don't hate me. I can't talk apparently. They maneuvered the sleeping teenager. Shota hooked his arms under Midoriya's, lifting him easily with a lighter. He was lighter than a boy with that much power should be. Hisashi while Hisashi guided his legs. They carried him to the sofa, settling him into a nest of blankets Shota had prepared. Midoriya let out a tiny, soft mumble as he hit the pillow, his face scrunching up for a second as he settled into the cushion before smoothing out into a deep, hopefully dreamless sleep. Hisashi tucked the heavy quilt up to the boy's chin, lingering for a moment to brush a stray hair roll away from the medical tape on Midoriya's cheek. Patting his shoulder one last time, Shota stood at the edge of the living room, watching them. The sight of his husband and his student in the dim, quiet apartment felt surreal, yet grounded. For all the chaos of the night, the precinct, the car ride revelation, the stationary heist, there's a profound peace in seeing the kid finally still. Come on, Shoto whispered, tugging gently at the sleeve of Hisashi's pink hoodie to draw his attention. Hisashi looked up, his expression soft and wary. He stood slowly, his joints popping as in the quiet room. He took one last look at the kid nestled in the blankets before following Shota to the hallway. He's going to be so embarrassed when he wakes up, Hisashi breathed. He's leaning into Shota's space as they walked. Probably, Shota admitted, in a low grovel, but he's alright. That's the only part that matters. As they reached their bedroom, Shota paused, looking back towards the living room. One last time, he reached out and caught Hisashi's hand, squeezing it briefly. And Hisashi, Yasha? Thanks for the pants. Hisashi let out a quiet, muffled, wheezed laugh, leaning his forward against Shota's shoulder. Anytime, babe. Anytime. A few days later. Here's my essay, Aizawa-sensei, Midoriya said, handing over a stack of papers that was far too thick for a simple reflection. They were in the faculty lounge, and Yagi, who had been nursing a cup of tea, pricked up at the sight of his protege. Young Midoriya, what is that essay for? Shota took a paper with a very sigh, flipping it through the numbered pages. Your puzzled pupil got into a little incident the other night. Yagi's eyes widened, and his posture immediately straightening with concern. What happened? Young Midoriya, are you hurt? Thankfully, Rico had made a quick work of the bruise the day before, leaving the boy's face clean, though he still looked a bit sheepish. It's nothing really, All Might. Got into a fight at a bar. Showed a deadpan. Not looking up from the first page of the essay, which apparently was a table of contents. Yagi went deathly still. He stared at Midoriya, then at Shota, his brain struggling to recoil. Young Midoriya with Midnight Brawl. He opened his mouth. Shota had expected him to give a lecture on hero ethics or public safety, but then his eyes flickered with a strange, untilted spark of pride. Did he win? Yagi asked. Shota turned his head slowly, his gaze flat and lethal. If a student hadn't been standing right in the middle of the room, he would have used language so vulgar, so vulgar, he'd have to personally wash Midoriya's ears with soap. That's it. Shota rasped, his voice tripping with exhaustion of a man who had reached his absolute limit. I'm done with you two idiots. Yagi had the grace to look slightly sheepish, though the faint, proud glimmer in his eyes didn't vanish. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his professional composure. Of course, safety first. fighting is a last resort, young Midoriya. A very, very last resort. But, it is, in this instance, 32 pages. Aizawa-sensei, Midoriya squeaked, leaning over the desk as if the sheer volume of his writing could bridge the gap of his teacher's disappointment. I even included a section on how to de-escalate without using physical objects as a blunt weapon. I mean, I do have some experience. I do have some experience. Get out, Shota muttered. For example, both of you. Midoriya, get to class. Yaki, go find a hobby that doesn't involve encouraging Midoriya's street fighting career. Midoriya nodded frantically, bowing so low he nearly hit the desk before scrambling towards the door. Just as he reached the threshold, he paused, looking back at Shota. For a brief second, the impossible, reckless, bone-breaking student vanished, and the kid who had fallen asleep on his teacher's chair in borrowed, oversized clothes peered through. He offered a small, tentative smile, a silent thank you that went beyond the essay. Shota didn't. Sorry guys, I just got a Discord message from my friend, so that blocked my screen because it pops up on my screen while I'm trying to read. That went beyond the essay. Shota didn't smile back. He didn't scowl either. He just gave a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. Once the door clicked shut, leaving Shota alone with the mountain of paperwork and a very smug-looking All Might, Shota leaned back and sighed. He looked down at the 32-page report. On the cover, in Midoriya's neatest possible script, the title Structural Vulnerability of Communicable Survival and Ethics of Non-Quirk Combat. If you ever encourage his antics again, Toshinori, Shota said without looking up, I'm telling the principal it was your idea to take him to the bar. Yagi coughed into his hand, looking generally terrified for the first time in the morning. No, Aizawa, let's not be hasty. Shota ignored him. Opening the report, he had a feeling it was actually going to be a very good read. That is the end of the fic. Finally. Remember, this is only part 1 of Midoriya's original context. This is the only one I'm doing in full length, because this one, it was supposed to be 70 subscriber special, but now we have over 100. So that's why I did 1 hour 20 minutes instead of 1 hour. You got 20 minutes for the 14 people who subscribed. There's also notes, which is just saying that this was fun to write for the author and to have a lovely day. That is the end of Learning Curve by Lemonhead15. Part 1 of the Midoriya Emergency Contact Solution. Midoriya's Emergency Contact. Have a great night, day, or whatever time zone you're in.